To understand JavaScript, you must first understand the basics, stuff like strings, variables, objects, and so on. In this video, I'm going to take you through these basic concepts and more. Hopefully you'll find this a useful resource as you learn JavaScript. Feel free to leave a comment below with any questions you might have at the end, and be sure to drop a like on the video if you find it useful. Okay, so I'm first going to make a directory here and just build out a quick application. So I'll call this JavaScript Basics and cd into JavaScript Basics. And I'm going to create an index.html file and also main.js. Go ahead and open this up. Okay, in my index.html, I'm just going to set up a quick JS Basics in here. I'm going to put and that should be main.js. Now that this is set up, I also want to bring in a script for the JavaScript. So we're going to start with numbers in JavaScript. And a number is basically a number. It's exactly how it sounds. So I'll start off by just console logging out some numbers, just so you see what they look like in the terminal. So open this and I click refresh, and oh, that's not working. That's a typo. So it should be src for source. And I reload that, and you can see these are the three numbers we logged out. So next what you can do is we can do some maths with numbers. So I can say 2 plus 2, console log the result of that out, and it gives me 4. So here you can see this white text here is a string, and the purple text here is a number. We'll get to strings in a couple of minutes. So we've done plus here. We can also do multiplication, division, subtraction. So I'll just show you some multiplication real quick. So I do 5 and then use asterisks. 10 equals, and then in here, I'm going to do 5 times 10 and reload. And you can see we've got 5 times 10 equals 50. So mathematics works with numbers. So we'll move on to strings next. And you can think of a string as basically just like a word or a sentence or anything you might use in a sentence, for example. So I'm just going to console log and say this is a string, and you can see I have quotation marks around it. And if I save that and print it out, you can say this is a string. So I'm going to get rid of these for now. And we can just say this is a string, console logged out. So you can see I'm using double quotation marks here. I can also use single quotation marks here. So single quotes, it does the same thing. And if I wanted to have an apostrophe in here, for example, I'm going to surround it by double quotes. So it knows that the apostrophe is not a single quote. So we can just say we're using both here. And you can see that it console logs out the strings properly. Okay, next we'll look at Booleans, and Boolean is basically true or false value. And that's all there is to it. So we'll say true, and we'll say false. Save those, and you get true or false. Those are your two Boolean values. And when we look at conditionals later, you'll see how we use Booleans and what they're for. So next we're moving on to variables. You can think of a variable like a label or a proper noun. So my name is Ian. That's like a variable for me as a person. A banana is a variable for this yellow fruit. So a variable is basically a word that you make up that you assign to something in the code. So you can say var for variable and say age, and I'm going to say equals, and I'll give it a number. So age is 25. Now if I was to console log out age, give that a refresh, and you can see there is 25. Now this var syntax is a little bit older. Var has been kind of replaced by const and let. So const, for example, is short for constant, and that means once you assign something to it, you cannot change it afterwards. So I'll show you here quickly. Const first name equals Sam, and we'll just console log out their first name is first name, and we can say their first name is Sam. But if I wanted to change it, I couldn't. So I could, if I wanted to say first name equals Joe, and then now they are first name. It says a type error assignment to constant variable. So we cannot reassign something that has been assigned to a constant variable. If you wanted to do that in the code, for example, you could use let. So I'm going to delete this here and I'll say let second name equals Smith. Say second name is second name. We can log that out. We can see second name is Smith. Now I could say second name equals Neil. If I console log this out now after changing it, you can see here we've got second name is Smith, then I changed it and it's now Neil. And I can combine the two variables here and say their full name is first name, comma, I need a comma there, second name. So now you've got their full name is Sam Neil. You can also perform calculations with variables just like you would with numbers. So if I say const subtotal, oh gosh, total equals 100 and tax equals 10, then I can say total is subtotal plus tax. And then we can see the total is 110, which is what we're expecting. And finally with strings, what you can do is something called string interpolation. So that allows you to write a string, insert some value inside the middle of the string, maybe another variable, and then write more string if you need to. So I can say, let's say const person details equals, when you're concatenating with a string literal, which is what this is called, you want to start with backticks. And then inside the backticks, you can write your string. And then if you want to use a variable, you need to use the $sign and these curly braces. And inside of here, you can stick any of your variables. So I can type in first name. You can see that VS Code recognizes what we're doing here. So it automatically changes first name to a blue color. And then I will say name is first name and second name. And then I will do a slash age. And I'll have age, which I have defined up here. So I have second name defined, I have first name defined, and I have age defined. So I can now concatenate those all into a sentence using a string literal. So if I save that, actually I want to log it out. So details are person details. Refresh there, you can see that we have details are name, Sam Neil, age 25. And we know Sam Neil's not 25, by the way. Okay, next thing we're going to look at is arrays. You can think of an array as like a list of items. It can contain Booleans, it could contain variables, strings, numbers, objects. Anything you can define in JavaScript can go inside of an array. So an array is something that is between two square brackets. So it looks something like this. If I'm going to put a number of years into an array, I could say 1979, 1988, 2002. So this is an array that contains three different numbers, and these numbers obviously correspond to years, so I've decided to call this array years. You can also make an array full of strings, so we can say equals apple, banana, strawberry, peach. So I've got a bunch of strings in here, and then if I want to console log it out, I can say years and fruits, and you can see what this looks like inside of the terminal. So here are our two arrays. As we got our years here, you can see this purple indicates that it's a number, and we've got green that's indicating that's a string inside of an array. When you look deeper into an array, it's actually an object, which we haven't explained yet, but you can see that it comes with different indexes. So what that means is if I want to access the second value inside of an array, which is banana, I want to use the second index, which in JavaScript is 1. So indexes work like the first item is index 0, the second item is index 1, and so on. So I can say second fruit equals fruits, and I do square brackets to access the index. And then I can put 1 because we know that 1 is the second index. And then if I do second fruit is second fruit, and reload that. I can say second fruit is banana. So I've accessed the banana from the array. I can also determine how many fruits are inside of this array by using the length property. So if we look again at this array in here, you can see there's a length property here and it's telling me 4. So all I need to do to get that is say, let's say there a console log. We can use a string literal here and we can say there are, and inside of here we can say fruits, and we just get dot length and say this. So this is going to give us a number of fruits in the array. So here we say there are 4 fruits, which we know to be correct. Now arrays have many methods available to them, which means there are a lot of calculations and mutations you can do with the data inside of an array. I'm just going to show you one real quick here as an example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say take fruits, and I've got a for each method here that we can use on any array. So I'll say for each, and then we get a function inside of this for each. And I'm going to open it up like this. The first argument that we have here is each element inside of the array. So for each, we're going to loop over each element in the array. So I'm going to call this fruit. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter, but it's referencing each item in the array. For each fruit, and then all I'm going to simply do is console log each fruit, actually console log fruit name, and say fruit. And then we'll refresh here. You can see here that we have looped over each item in the array and we have logged it to the console. Moving on to objects. An object is like a collection of data. So you can think of it like a customer record. So if you go into the doctor's office, they have a CRM system there with your details. They might have your name, your address, your date of birth, your medical history. That can all be stored inside of an object. And an object looks like this. It has curly braces around it and it has key value pairs inside of it. So we're going to create an object here called person, and we're going to open it up with the curly braces, and then we're going to give it some key value pairs. So the first key is going to be first name. We can say Florence, and then that's not first name, it's going to be first name. And then the next key value pair needs to be separated by a comma. So we say first name Florence, second name Nightingale, and we'll say occupation nurse. So now we've created an object. So if I wanted to first object, we'll say person, we'll log that out. You can say here's our object that we've just created. So key value pairs, first name, occupation, and second name. The order inside of an object doesn't matter. If you look at an array though, the orders are maintained. So that's one thing to bear in mind. So we can access items inside of an array by using dot notation. So for example here, I can say this person's first name is, I can say person dot first name. So I've got access to every value in this object through the keys. So I do person dot first name and save that. And we can see this person's first name is Florence. Now you can actually add values to an object yourself inside of the code using the dot notation again. So what we can do here is we can give Florence a date of birth. So if we said person.dob, which doesn't exist now, or technically it's undefined, we'll say person.dob equals 1820. And now we can say Florence was born in, and we do person.dob. And it's got 1820. So I'll take that off and I'll just show you inside that you've got the object here, and DOB now exists as part of this object. Now I'll comment this out, and if I was to access .dob without having created it, it's not going to create an error, but what it'll do is return undefined. So you can see here now, Florence was born in undefined. So it means that DOB hasn't been defined as part of that object yet. And I can even assign an array as a value. So if I wanted to say person.favorite fruits, I could assign the fruits array to that favorite fruits. And then if I log out Florence again, person, can reload, and you can see now we have a key value pair of favorite fruits and the fruits array that we created earlier. Okay, so we're going to move on to comparisons now. And a comparison is something that will always return true or false. So this is where Booleans come in pretty handy. So we can create comparisons using an if statement. An if statement looks something like this. So we say if, and then we have parentheses, and we have the value or the comparison inside of this parentheses. And then outside of that, we use curly braces for a block. And inside of the block, we can do what we wanted to do if that comparison is equal to true. So a very simple example is if true, which will always be equal to true. And therefore, because this is true, whatever you put in here will execute. So I'm going to say console log, yes, of course, it's true. And we'll reload, and you can say, yes, of course, it's true. Now, if I change this to false, you're going to see nothing. Nothing happens. Because if false, then we don't execute whatever is inside of this block. Now, you're not going to actually write true or false, because you always know the value of true or false. But what you might do is use a variable. You can't tell what that variable value is, so you need the code to determine whether it's true or false. So for example, instead of putting Boolean in here, I can change this to say person.dob equals, and I need to use 3 equals here. If I was to change it to 1821, press save, reload here. Of course, it doesn't log out because it's not true. Now, you want to do something if it is true or if it's false, you can use an else statement. So we can say here, else, and then we get a block again, and we can say console log, no, they weren't born in 1820. So now I can do a reload and I can see that it logged out the else condition. Now, you can see here this triple equals. Triple equals means a strict equal, so it has to be exactly the same. So if I was to write 1821 as a number, and I was to compare it with 1821 as a string, you can see again, no, they weren't born in 1820. So that's still false. If I was to drop one of the equals, say double equals, suddenly it's changed it to yes, they were born in 1820, but what's going on there, right? So double equals in JavaScript tries to do a type conversion before comparing. So what it's doing here is it's going, I think I know what you meant. You've got 1821 as a string and 1821 as a number. I'm just going to convert them both to numbers and we will then compare them. Typically, you don't want to do that. It allows for mistakes. So you probably mostly want to use triple equals to be safe. So I'm going to just do that again. And you see, no, they weren't born in 1821. We can also do number comparisons, whether they're greater than or equal to. So I'll just do Jane age equals 41. Caroline age equals 38, excuse me. And then I will say if Jane age is greater than Caroline age, then we can say Jane is older than Caroline. And then we can go else. Jane is not older than Caroline. Now I can't say Caroline's older because what if they're the same age, right? And we'll show you that in a minute. So I'll save this, give it a reload here. You can see Jane is older than Caroline. If I was to change this to less than, and say Jane is younger than Caroline, reload, and Jane is younger than Caroline. Jane is not younger than Caroline because you can do the maths yourself. Now, if you wanted to do something if Jane was younger than or the same age as Caroline, you simply need to add an equal sign after your angle bracket. So now I'm saying Jane is younger or equal to Caroline. Caroline's age. So we say Jane is younger or equal to Caroline's age. If she isn't, then she's older, right? So now say Jane is older than Caroline. And there we get Jane is older than Caroline. So you can do less than or equals or greater than equals. Another way to make a comparison in JavaScript is with a ternary. A ternary can be like a single line in JavaScript. So it looks a little bit different, but we say Caroline age is greater than Jane age. So this is basically saying the same as if Caroline age is greater than Jane age, then do something here. So the way a ternary works is you say you have the the true or false value, which we're creating here. Then you do a question mark. And then here you do the first thing. So you say Caroline is older. Then you use a colon for the else condition. So we say Caroline is not older. And of course, Caroline is not older. If we wanted to make Caroline older, we could say 44. And then here you can see that Caroline is older. So what that's doing is saying Caroline age is greater than Jane age. So this is true. So the first thing resolves if this is equal to true. And then this section resolves if that is equal to false. You have a few functions available to you in the browser that you access using window dot. And the ones I'm going to show you here are basically related to interacting with the user. So the first thing I'm going to show you is alert. So we access that through window.alert, and you might say game over. So if I save that, when you run this, you'll see what happens here. This alert comes up. It says game over. And all you can do here is click OK. The second thing we're going to look at is a confirm. So we can say window.confirm and ask a question. So you say, do you want to continue? The way this works is it actually returns a value from the user interaction, and that value is a true or false value. So say should continue equals the result of this. If should continue, we can say go ahead or else stop. And that should be console.log. So I've commented out alert because you can't override that. So I'm going to do refresh, and it says now with the confirm, do you want to continue? So if I say cancel, it says stop, of course. Refresh it again, click OK, it says go ahead. So you can put code in here that you want to action based on the user deciding whether or not they want to continue. The next one is window.prompt. And what prompt does is it allows the user to enter a custom value. So we could say, what is your name, please? And then that value can be assigned to a variable. So we say their name equals, what is their name? And say here. So if I reload that, now you've got a prompt. So it says, what is your name, please? I'm going to just say Ian, click OK, and you can see that now it logs the name out. Okay, finally we move on to functions. And functions are basically a way to wrap any code in JavaScript. And you use a function, you can use it in multiple places. You can just use it as a way to describe a block of code. But I'll show you exactly how functions work now. We create a function using the function keyword. And then next comes basically a variable. So you're going to create any name that you want to assign to the function. So I'm going to call this one say hello, because all it's going to do is say hello. So I'll say hello. So I've now decided what the name of that function is. And immediately after this comes a pair of parentheses. And then we've got a block of code. So inside here is where you put the code that goes inside of that function. So I'm going to say, we'll do a console log hello. And then we will also do a window.alert to say hello there. And then to actually invoke a function, you just say, call the function name, which is say hello, and invoke it using the parentheses. So I'm going to save that, reload, and you can see it's now, we don't need this, let me get rid of that. So you can see it's on the console log, so it's done one thing, and then it's also done the second thing I asked it to do, which is show the alert. Now, a function can also take arguments. And an argument is something like a variable that you would use inside of the code in the function. So I can call this next one, say, hey, hello, say hello to, and then I want to say, well, you need to give me the name to say hello to because it might be different. So I can say hello to name, and I could just do a window.alert. And we use our string literal here, and we can say hello and the name that's been passed in. And I'm going to say hello to, and then when I'm invoking it, of course, I need to pass in a name. So I'm going to just say hello to myself. I'm going to comment this out because I don't want it running twice. I'll reload, and it says, hello, Ian. If I say hello, Sam, it'll change to hello, Sam. So that is now making the code a lot more reusable because I don't always have to have the same name in there. I can just pass in whatever name maybe the user enters in a form, for example. Now, functions can also be written with a slightly different syntax. This is commonly known as fat arrow syntax. So it starts with a variable, and instead of function, we start with const for constant, which I showed you earlier. And I'm going to call this a who is older function. So this is going to repeat some of the code that we had earlier. Just like you create a normal variable, we're going to give it an equal sign. And instead of like a name or something like that, we're going to give it a function. And a function basically looks like this. So you take the parentheses, we've got a fat arrow, which is basically an equal sign and an open bracket. And then we've got our block of code in here again. So this is slightly different syntax for creating a function, but in a nutshell, it does exactly the same thing. So I'm going to say person1, person2, and what I'm going to do is use an if statement. So if person1.age is greater than person2.age, I'll do console log, and I'm going to use the person object that's been passed in. So I can say person.name is older. And then if I don't want to execute any more code after this, I can simply write return. So I can say, if I know this condition to be true, I don't want to execute any more code following this. So I'm simply just going to return, and that basically stops the execution of the code from there. I'm going to create a second if statement saying if person2.age is older than person1.age. And I'll just copy this here. And I've just noticed a mistake. I'm going to say person1 is older, so person1, and in this case, it's going to be person2 is older. And then finally, what if they're the same age, right? So we can just say they are the same age. Now, as I explained, we've got a return that breaks the execution of the code. So it's going to stop executing here, which means if this is true, none of this code is going to run. If that's false, then it's going to move on to this. And if this is true, then this won't run. But if this is false as well, then we get to here. So this is like saying else if, but it's a different way of writing it. You can use return to basically stop the code you were writing. So now we're going to create two people. So we'll say George, and we'll create an object, and we'll say name, George Clooney. We'll give him an age of, what is he, 60. And then we'll go with somebody called Julia. And then again, she's an object, Julia Roberts. She is 54. And now I can invoke the function who is older, pass in George and Julia. And now if I run this, it tells me that George Clooney is older. It doesn't matter which order I pass them in. So I can say, let's pass Julia in first and George in second. Still says George Clooney is older, because this code makes sure that it doesn't matter which order you pass it into, it does the same thing. It does this person 1 is older, person 2 is older. And that is basically functions in a nutshell. If any of that was confusing, please let me know in the comments below and I can try to clear it up for you. If there's a similar topic you'd like to see me make a video on, also add a comment to tell me what that is. And of course, please subscribe to my channel if you're not already. On the screen now, you'll see some other videos that you might find useful as you're learning how to code. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.